The first thing I heard that morning was the sound of 18 pairs of boots hitting my gravel driveway. Not one or two men. 18. I was standing on my front porch with a coffee mug in my hand when 3 black SUVs rolled past my cattle gate and stopped in front of my ranch house. Then the doors opened. Men in dark uniforms stepped out. One of them pointed directly at me. "Mr. Cole," he shouted. "You need to come with us." I took one slow sip of coffee. "Who are you?" "The OA security enforcement team." I almost laughed. I owned 42 acres in Red Creek, Texas. My property was outside their original subdivision. I had never signed their HOA agreement, and these men had just made the biggest mistake of their lives, because they didn't know who they were standing in front of. My name is Jack Mercer. I'm 48 years old. For most of my adult life, I had been very good at keeping my past buried. I had spent years in the military, eventually commanding special operations teams overseas. I had learned how to read people before they spoke. I had learned how to recognize a threat before it became one. And most importantly, I'd learned that the loudest person in a room was rarely the most dangerous. So when 18 men came onto my property that morning, I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten anybody. I simply set my coffee on the porch railing and asked the man in front, "Show me the warrant." He stopped. "What? The warrant?" I repeated. His face tightened. "You've been notified of an AOA removal order." I ask for a warrant. "You're in violation of community regulations. My property isn't part of your community." He glanced behind him at the other guards. That tiny hesitation told me everything. They weren't sure either. Then a woman stepped out of the middle SUV. She was wearing a navy blazer, white blouse, black slacks, and a silver HOA badge clipped to her jacket. Her name was Patricia Grayson. She was the president of the Red Creek Estates Homeowners Association, and she had spent the last 6 months trying to make my life miserable. Patricia walked toward my porch like she owned the place. "Miss D. Mercer, this ends today." I looked at her. "Nothing has started. You refused 3 compliance notices." "I refused 3 illegal demands. You've been warned." "About what?" She pointed toward my pasture. "Your livestock." "My cattle. They violate community appearance standards." I stared at her. Then I looked across my property. 42 acres of open Texas land, a red barn, a wooden fence, 24 cattle grazing beneath the morning sun, and behind it all a line of newly built suburban houses. Those houses belonged to Red Creek Estates. My ranch had existed for decades before the subdivision. The developer had built the neighborhood around 3 sides of my land. Then, when property values started rising, the HOA decided my ranch was an eyesore. At first, they complained about my barn, then the fence, then the cattle, then my gravel road, then my old Ford F-250 parked beside the barn. Every complaint came with the same demand: bring the property into compliance. But there was one problem. I wasn't part of their HOA, and I had the documents to prove it. Patricia folded her arms. "You were given an opportunity to cooperate. I offered to meet with the board, and you refused to surrender control of your property." I smiled. "That's an interesting way of saying no." Her expression hardened. "Remove him." The 18 guards started walking toward me. That was the moment I realized Patricia wasn't bluffing. She genuinely believed she had the authority to take me off my own land. The first guard climbed the porch steps. I didn't move. He was a big man, maybe 6'2", wearing black tactical style clothing. He stopped 3 feet from me. "Sir, you're going to come with us peacefully." I looked at his chest. His name patch read D. Harris. "Do you know where you are, Mr. Harris? My job is to escort you off the property." "No." I pointed toward the gravel beneath his boots. "You're standing on private property." He looked toward Patricia. She gave him a small nod. "Proceed." Harris reached for my arm. I moved 1 step backward. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted every camera on my house to capture what happened next. "You touch me," I said quietly, "and this becomes a very different situation." Harris stopped. One of the other guards laughed. "Man, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at him. "What's your name?" "Why?" "Because if you put your hands on me, I want to remember it." The laughter disappeared. Then Patricia shouted, "Take him out." 3 guards moved forward. I heard an engine behind me. My neighbor, Sam Reynolds, had stopped his pickup at the edge of the driveway. Sam was 63, retired, and had lived beside my ranch long before Red Creek Estates existed. He rolled down his window. I turned. He looked terrified. "Don't fight them?" I shook my head. "I'm not fighting anybody." Sam looked at Patricia. "Patricia, you can't do this." She ignored him. Instead, she pulled out a folder. "You've been served." She threw the papers onto my porch. They landed beside my coffee. I glanced down. Then I smiled. Because the first page contained something Patricia clearly hadn't noticed. The legal description of the property. I picked up the papers. Read it twice. Then looked at her. "Patricia, what? You really should have read your own paperwork." Her face changed. "What are you talking about?" I held up the page. "This says parcel 17. Les, my ranch is parcel 11. She froze. Sam slowly stepped out of his truck. "What?" I turned the document around so he could see. Sam walked closer. His eyes widened. "Oh, that's bad." Patricia snatched the paper from my hand. She read it. Then read it again. One of the guards stepped beside her. "Mom." She whispered something I couldn't hear. The guard looked confused. "Is there a problem?" Patricia folded the document.
"No," I smiled. "Wes!"
She stared at me. "You're still required to vacate." "Under what authority?" "The board has approved the action." "The board isn't the government." Her jaw tightened. You've been obstructive from the beginning. No, Patricia. I've been patient. I walked toward the edge of the porch. And you're about to find out how patient I've been. She scoffed. You think this little ranch gives you special privileges? I looked at the 18 guards standing in my driveway. My paperwork does. Then I heard another vehicle approaching. A white county SUV came around the bend. Everyone turned. The vehicle stopped beside the gate. A man in a tan uniform stepped out. Sheriff Daniel Brooks. He was 52, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, and known throughout Red Creek for being careful with property disputes. He walked toward us with a folder under his arm. What's going on here? Patricia immediately approached him. Sheriff, thank God. This man is refusing a lawful removal order. Sheriff Brooks looked at me. Mr. Mercer? Yes, Sheriff. Then he looked at the guards. Who hired you? A man near the SUVs answered. Red Creek Estates HOA. The sheriff's expression changed. Where's the court order? Silence. Where's the warrant? More silence. Sheriff Brooks looked at Patricia. Patricia straightened. This is an HOA enforcement matter, no, the sheriff said. This is a private property matter. But he violated. That's not what I asked. The sheriff opened his folder. And I have something you might want to see. He pulled out a county map. Then he walked toward my fence. This property is outside the HOA's recorded boundary. Patricia stared at the map. No, Wes. She looked at me. For the first time that morning, I saw fear in her eyes. But then she did something I wasn't expecting. She smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was the smile of someone who believed she still had a card left to play. You're right, she said. I frowned. She turned toward the 18 guards. Everybody leave. They began walking back toward the SUVs. I watched them carefully. Then Patricia looked directly at me. But this isn't over, Mr. Mercer. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a second envelope. This is. She tossed it onto my porch. The envelope landed beside my coffee. I picked it up. There was no HO logo, no county seal, no attorney letterhead, just 4 words handwritten across the front. Not a farseed sell. I looked up. Patricia was already walking away. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt on a battlefield, in a courtroom, or during any dangerous operation overseas. Uncertainty. Because if Patricia had found a legal way to challenge ownership of my ranch, 18 guards were the least of my problems. I opened the envelope. And what I found inside made my blood run cold. Because the document didn't just claim that the HOA owned part of my property. It claimed they had proof. Proof with a signature. My signature. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had never signed it. Message 1 complete. I stared at the signature for nearly 30 seconds. It looked like mine. That was the problem. The letters were slightly slanted. The M had the same sharp first stroke. The final R in Mercer curled upward exactly the way mine did when I signed quickly. But it wasn't my signature. I knew because I remembered every important document I'd signed over the years. Military orders, property deeds, bank documents, wills, insurance papers. The original purchase agreement for my ranch. I had signed thousands of documents. This wasn't one of them. Sheriff Brooks stepped onto the porch. What is it? I handed him the paper. He read it silently. His expression became serious.
Where did she get this?
She didn't say.
He turned the page over. There was a notary stamp, a date, a witness signature, and beneath them, a legal description of a strip of land running along the eastern side of my ranch. Almost 8 acres. My stomach tightened. That's my land. Brooks nodded. Looks like it. A Sam stepped onto the porch behind him. What does it say? I handed him the document. He read it, then looked at me. Jack, they're claiming you transferred 8 acres to the Red Creek Estates Development Company. I didn't. I know. Sheriff Brooks looked at me. Do you have your original deed in the house? Get it? I walked inside. The moment the front door closed behind me, I stopped. I could still hear the guards outside starting their engines, but I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the signature. Someone had forged my name, and whoever had done it had access to enough information to make the forgery look legitimate. I went into my office. The room hadn't changed in years. Dark wooden desk, old leather chair, 2 filing cabinets, a framed photograph of my father standing beside the original red barn, and on the wall a faded military photograph I rarely looked at anymore. I opened the bottom filing cabinet. Inside were proper records organized in labeled folders. I pulled out the folder marked Mercer Then I found something else. A second folder, HOA. I carried both back outside. Sheriff Brooks spread the original deed across the porch table. Sam leaned over his shoulder. I pointed at the legal description. Read the eastern boundary. Brooks followed the lines with his finger. Creek Road. Exactly. And the disputed 8 acres. Inside my original parcel. He looked at the forged document again. They've drawn a completely different boundary. That's impossible. Not impossible, I said. Illegal? Brooks looked toward the road. I'm gonna make some calls. He pulled out his phone. I watched him walk toward his SUV. Sam lowered his voice. Jack. What? You understand what this means?
Yeah, yes.
They aren't trying to get you to follow HOA rules anymore. They're trying to take your land. I nodded. Sam looked nervous. Why? That was the question I couldn't answer. The HOA had complained about my cattle. They'd complained about my fence. They'd complained about my barn. But none of that explained why they suddenly wanted 8 acres of my ranch. Unless the land was worth more than I realized, I looked toward the eastern boundary. Beyond the fence was an empty stretch of pasture. Nothing special, no house, no barn, no pond, just grass. Then I remembered something. 3 months earlier, I'd seen survey flags there. I had assumed they were for the subdivision, but now I wasn't so sure. Sheriff Brooks returned. County records are showing something interesting. What? The HOA filed a boundary amendment 6 months ago. Well, my jaw tightened. Without telling me. They claim you consented. Didn't. Brooks nodded. I figured. Sam looked at him. What happens now? Brooks looked at me. Don't sign anything. I wasn't planning to. And don't let anyone onto that 8-acre section. Why? Because if they're trying to establish possession, they may be trying to create evidence that you abandoned it. I looked at the fence. Suddenly every survey flag I'd ignored became important. I walked toward the eastern pasture. Sam followed. We passed the red barn and reached the wooden fence. There were 3 orange flags tied to the posts. I hadn't put them there. Sam pointed. Those weren't here last week. I crouched beside the nearest one. The soil around the fence post had been disturbed. Fresh boot prints. Someone had been inside my pasture. I stood. Sheriff. Brooks walked over. What? I pointed. He studied the ground. Looks like someone came through recently. Not one person? He looked at me. I pointed toward the grass. There were multiple sets of footprints. At least 4, maybe more. Brooks crouched. Could be surveyors. Without permission. He didn't answer. I walked farther along the fence. Then I saw something that made me stop. A small metal stake had been driven into the ground. Stamped into the top were 2 letters, RCE, Red Creek Estates. I pulled out my phone and photographed it. Then another thought hit me. Sheriff, when did they file the boundary amendment? 6 months ago. Exactly when they started complaining about my property. He nodded. That would be about right. I looked back toward the subdivision. There were more than 200 houses over there. Most of them were less than 5 years old. And suddenly the entire situation looked different. This wasn't about cattle. It wasn't about appearance. It wasn't about HOA rules. They wanted access to my land. But why? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. That afternoon, a black sedan pulled into my driveway. A man stepped out. Gray suit, white shirt, no tie. He carried a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Daniel Whitmore, Patricia Grayson's attorney. He walked toward me with the confidence of a man who had already won. Mr. Mercer. Mr. Whitmore. I'd like to resolve this without unnecessary escalation. I laughed. You sent 18 guards to my property this morning. That was a misunderstanding. No.
That was trespassing.
He smiled politely. I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I looked at the briefcase. I'm curious. About, why does the OA want 8 acres of my ranch? His smile disappeared for half a second. That was enough. There is a proposed infrastructure project. What kind? A drainage improvement. Then why do you need my land? Easement. You forged my signature. He became still. I wouldn't use that word. I would. He opened the briefcase. Mr. Mercer, the document was properly notarized. Then your notary committed fraud. That's an allegation. So is your claim that I signed it. He pulled out another document. This is an offer. I didn't take it. How much? $120,000. Sam, who had been standing near the barn, nearly choked. I looked at Whitmore. For 8 acres.
Yes!
That's not an offer. Then what is it? An admission. He frowned. Off what? That you know the land is worth more. For the first time, Whitmore looked genuinely annoyed. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes. I stepped closer. But refusing to sell land I never offered is not one of them. He closed the briefcase. Think carefully. I already have. He started walking back toward his car. Then he stopped. One more thing. I waited. Your ranch sits between Red Creek Estates and a proposed commercial development. I said nothing. He continued. The county is considering approving a new access road. I looked at him. And the road would run directly through your eastern pasture. I stared at him. There it was. The reason. They didn't want 8 acres for a drainage ditch. They wanted a corridor, a road, an access route connecting the subdivision to the proposed commercial development. And my property was sitting directly in the middle. Whitmore got into his sedan. Before closing the door, he looked at me. You can sell now and walk away with a substantial amount of money. And if I don't, he smiled. Then things become complicated. His car disappeared down the gravel road. Sam came over. Jack. I heard him. What are you going to do? I looked at the eastern pasture. Find out exactly how complicated they plan to make this. That evening I drove into town. Not to the office. Not to the sheriff. I went to the county records building. The clerk behind the counter recognized me. Jack Mercer. Yes. Long time. I need every document filed concerning my property in the last 12 months. She typed something into the computer. There's quite a bit. Give me everything. She looked at me. Everything. 20 minutes later, she brought out a stack of files. I started reading. Survey requests, boundary amendments, engineering reports, drainage studies, development applications. Then I found something that made me stop breathing for a moment. A county planning document dated 4 months earlier. The proposed road was marked in red. It crossed my eastern pasture. but beneath the map was a note. Access contingent upon acquisition of Parcel 11E. Parcel 11E was mine. I turned the page. The estimated commercial value of the completed development was listed. It was enormous. Hundreds of millions of dollars. And suddenly the $120,000 offer looked ridiculous. They weren't trying to buy 8 acres. They were trying to buy the key to an entire development. I kept reading. Then I saw the names. Red Creek Estates Development LLC, a construction company, 2 investment groups, and one name I recognized immediately, Patricia Grayson. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was listed as a managing partner in the development company. I leaned back in the chair. The HOA wasn't acting on behalf of the homeowners. The HOA was being used to pressure me into surrendering the land. I photographed every page. Then I noticed another document. It was a meeting record from 6 months earlier. The board had voted unanimously to pursue compulsory acquisition. I read the names: Patricia Grayson, Martin Cole, Linda Foster, Richard Hale, all HOA board members. Then I reached the final page. There was a handwritten note from the county planner. Owner resistance anticipated. Explore legal pressure before public hearing. I stared at those words. They hadn't simply planned to negotiate with me. They had planned to break me down. The forged signature suddenly made sense. The 18 guards made sense. The fake removal order made sense. Everything was part of the same strategy, but they had made one mistake. They had assumed I would panic. They didn't know my past. They didn't know what kind of man I had become after spending decades in situations where panic could get people killed. I gathered the documents. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Hello." A man's voice said, "Mr. Mercer, you need to stop digging." I stood still. "Who is this?" "You know what we're talking about." "I don't. You should leave the property voluntarily." I looked through the records room window. Outside, evening rain had begun falling. "And if I don't?" There was silence. Then the man said, "Your family has been contacted." My blood went cold. I gripped the phone. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." The line went dead. I immediately called my sister. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then my phone buzzed. A text message appeared. It contained a photograph. My sister's house Tate. Underneath it were 6 words. Titus can GT mutuars e. I stared at the screen, and something inside me changed. Until that moment I had been defending my land. Now I was defending my family. I left the county building and drove straight home. The rain had turned the gravel road into mud. When I reached the ranch gate, I stopped. My headlights swept across the property. Everything looked normal. The barn, the pasture, the house. Then I noticed something near the eastern fence. A vehicle, black, parked without lights. Watching my property, I turned off my headlights. The vehicle remained still. I didn't approach it. I called Sheriff Brooks. "Sheriff, there's a vehicle outside my eastern fence. Can you see the plate?" "No." "Stay inside your vehicle." I watched. 30 seconds passed, then the black vehicle started moving. It slowly drove away. I followed it from a distance. Not closely, just enough to keep it in sight. It turned onto County Road 14, then stopped at an intersection. Another vehicle pulled up beside it, a white pickup. They exchanged something. Then both vehicles disappeared in opposite directions. I memorized the plate numbers, and when I got home I finally understood something. The HOA had underestimated me, but I had underestimated them. This wasn't just a property dispute, it was a coordinated attempt to take my land, and someone was willing to threaten my family to make it happen. I walked into my house, locked the doors, and placed every document on my kitchen table. Then I opened the old military photograph hanging in my office. For years, I had kept that part of my life behind a locked door. I had promised myself I would never become that man again. But sometimes the past doesn't come back because you want it to. Sometimes it comes back because someone crosses a line. I looked at the photograph, then at the documents, then at the message on my phone. I picked up the phone and made one call. Not to the sheriff, not to my lawyer, to the one person from my old life who knew exactly how I operated. When he answered, I said only 4 words, "I need a favor?" And after a long silence he replied, "Jack Mercer? Les, I thought you were done." "So did I." He laughed quietly. Then somebody must have really messed up. I looked through the window at my ranch. They did. I hung up. The next morning I was going to stop defending myself. I was going to start building a case. And I had no idea that within 48 hours the HOA would make one final move that would put everything on the line. By sunrise I had stopped thinking like a homeowner. I was thinking like a commander again. Not because I wanted to, because someone had threatened my family. I drove to the county courthouse before 8 in the morning and met the attorney I had called the night before. Her name was Rachel Bennett. She was 44, sharp-eyed, calm, and almost impossible to intimidate. She had represented ranch owners in property disputes for more than 15 years. When I placed the forged document in front of her, she didn't react immediately. She read it once, then again. Then she looked at me. "Did you sign this?" "No." "Did you authorize anyone to sign it for you?" "No." "Did you ever discuss transferring these 8 acres?" "Never." Rachel leaned back. "Then this isn't an HOA dispute anymore." "I know. This is potentially fraud, forged conveyance, and an attempt to cloud your title." Kim, she smiled slightly. "That's why you hired me." She spent the next 2 hours going through every document I'd collected. By 10:30 she had built a timeline. The HOA had filed its boundary amendment 6 months earlier. 3 weeks later, the development company submitted plans for a commercial center. 2 months after that, the county received an access road proposal. Then came the first violation notice against my ranch. then another, and finally, the forged property transfer. Rachel tapped the papers. They've been creating a paper trail to make it look like I was already cooperating. Exactly. And the 18 guards? Pressure. She looked at me. They wanted you frightened enough to leave. I thought about Patricia's face. She had expected me to fold. Instead, she had given me evidence. Rachel picked up the final county planning document. This is the most important piece. Why? Because it proves their motive. She pointed to the proposed road. If this road isn't built, their development plan becomes dramatically more expensive. How much? I looked at her. So they're trying to steal 8 acres to unlock hundreds of millions? That's what it looks like. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because suddenly everything made sense. Rachel gathered the documents. I'm filing an emergency injunction. How fast? If the judge sees what I see today, by noon, the paperwork was filed. At 1:17 p.m. I received another call. This time it was Sheriff Brooks. Jack, where are you? Courthouse. Stay there. Why? There are people at your ranch. How many? County deputies are on the way. My stomach tightened. What are they doing? Construction equipment. I stood. Construction equipment. Backhoes. Trucks. Excavators. Rachel looked at me. What happened? I put the phone on speaker. Sheriff Brooks continued. They're claiming they have permission to begin preparing the access corridor. From who? The development company. Rachel immediately grabbed her files. They're trying to establish possession before the hearing. I looked at her. Then let's go. We reached my ranch 20 minutes later. The scene looked like something out of a war zone. 3 excavators stood beside my eastern fence. 6 dump trucks were parked along the gravel road. Dozens of workers were gathered near the pasture, and standing in the middle of them was Patricia Grayson. She was wearing the same navy blazer, same silver badge, same confident expression. Except this time she wasn't smiling. Sheriff Brooks pulled his SUV across the entrance, shut everything down. The excavator operator stopped. Patricia walked toward him. We have authorization from the development company. That doesn't authorize you to enter private property. She pointed toward a stack of documents. We have an easement. Rachel stepped forward. No, you don't. Patricia looked at her. Who are you? Rachel Bennett, attorney for Jack Mercer. Patricia's face went pale. Rachel held up a document. Your alleged easement is based on a forged signature. Patricia recovered quickly. That hasn't been proven. It doesn't need to be proven for you to stay off this property. She turned toward Sheriff Brooks. You can't stop a lawful construction project. Brooks looked at her. Actually, I can stop trespassing. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Then a black SUV arrived. Daniel Whitmore stepped out. He walked toward us holding a folder. Sheriff, perhaps we should discuss this professionally. Brooks shook his head. No. Whitmore stopped. No. Not until you produce a valid court order. Whitmore looked at Patricia. She whispered something. Then he looked back at me. Mr. Mercer, you're making a serious mistake. Rachel stepped between us. No, your client did. She handed him a copy of the county filing. Emergency injunction. Whitmore read it. His expression changed. You got this today. Les. He looked toward the construction crews. The machines powered off. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Patricia stepped closer to me. You think you've won? I looked at her. No. She frowned. I think you just lost. Her face hardened. You don't understand what you're interfering with. I understand perfectly. I held up the county development documents. You needed my land to build your road. She said nothing. You needed the road to unlock your commercial project. Still nothing. And you used the HOA to pressure me into giving it to you. Patricia's silence was answer enough. But I wasn't finished. You forged my signature. Whitmore interrupted. That is an allegation. Rachel smiled. Not for long. She turned toward Sheriff Brooks. We have the original deed, county records, surveillance footage, and a forensic document examiner standing by. Whitmore looked at Patricia. For the first time he looked worried. Then Patricia made the mistake that destroyed everything. She pointed at me. He's lying. Everyone turned. Patricia's voice rose. Has been blocking this project from the beginning. We tried to negotiate. We tried everything. Rachel calmly asked. Did you? Patricia glared at her. Yes. Then why did your board meeting minutes describe the goal as legal pressure before public hearing? Patricia froze. Rachel held up the document. You forgot one thing. What? Public records. The sheriff took the document. Then another. Then another. The county planner who had written the note was standing near the courthouse entrance. He had apparently arrived with another county official. He looked at the papers, then at Patricia. I never authorized anyone to falsify a property transfer. Patricia stared at him. You said we could proceed. I said the project could proceed if the land acquisition was lawful. Whitmore stepped back. Patricia looked around. Her 18 guards were nowhere to be seen. Her construction crews were shutting down. Her attorney was refusing to look at her, and the sheriff was holding documents that could put her in serious legal trouble. Then I heard someone behind me. Jack. I turned. My sister, Emily, was standing beside a county deputy. I hadn't seen her since the threatening message. I rushed toward her. Are you okay? She nodded. I'm fine. What happened? The sheriff sent someone to check on me. I hugged her. For the first time in 2 days I could breathe. Then Emily handed me something, a small envelope. This was left at my house. My stomach dropped. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. Mui swildi vteld to, you are borrow first. No signature. But I didn't need one. Sheriff Brooks looked at it. We'll keep it as evidence. I nodded. The next 3 weeks were a blur of hearings, depositions, investigators, and county meetings. The forensic examiner confirmed what I already knew. The signature on the transfer document had been copied from an old property record. The notary whose stamp appeared on the document denied witnessing my signature. The notary's logbook showed that I had never appeared before him. Then investigators uncovered something even bigger. The HOA's management company had paid the notary's office for several other documents connected to the development. That opened another investigation. Patricia resigned as HOA president before the final hearing. 2 board members followed. The development company suspended the commercial project, and the county revoked the proposed access road application. But there was still one final battle. The courtroom. On the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Neighbors from Red Creek Estates sat on one side. Ranch owners sat on the other. County officials filled the back rows. Patricia sat beside her attorney. She looked different. No navy blazer, no silver badge, no confident smile. Just a woman staring at the floor. Everyone stood. Rachel presented the evidence. The original deed, the forged transfer, the county map, the HOA meeting minutes, the development plans, the construction records, the threatening message, and finally, the surveillance footage from my ranch. The courtroom watched 18 guards enter my property. They watched Patricia order them to remove me. Then they watched Sheriff Brooks arrive. The judge paused the video. Mr. Mercer. Yes, Your Honor. Did you ever consent to the HOA's jurisdiction over your property? No, Your Honor. Did you ever sign this transfer document? No. Did you ever authorize the construction company to enter your land? No. The judge looked toward Patricia.
Ms. Grayson.
Her attorney stood. My client disputes the allegations. Rachel stood. We have no further dispute. She placed one final document on the evidence table. The county's original survey from 1978. The judge examined it, then compared it to the HOA's map. His expression hardened. This entire eastern boundary was altered. Rachel nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked toward the HOA's attorney, who approved this. Silence. Then one of the former board members spoke. Patricia. Patricia turned. You said it was legal. The courtroom went completely quiet. Patricia looked at him. You agreed to it. He shook his head. You told us the owner had signed. Patricia's face collapsed, and suddenly the truth was no longer something anyone could hide. The judge ruled in my favor. The disputed 8 acres remained mine. The HOA was permanently prohibited from enforcing its rules against my ranch. The forged transfer was declared void. The development company lost its proposed access corridor, and the case was referred for further investigation. But the best part came 3 months later. The county approved a completely different access route, one that didn't cross my property. The commercial project was redesigned, the subdivision remained, but the HOA was forced to change its leadership and management structure, and something unexpected happened. Some of the neighbors who had once complained about my cattle began stopping by. One brought homemade pie. Another brought his kids to watch the calves. Then Sam showed up one afternoon with 2 folding chairs. He sat beside me near the fence. You know, he said, I never thought I'd see Patricia lose. I smiled. Neither did she. Sam looked toward the eastern pasture. You ever think about selling? I laughed. Not a chance. He nodded. Good. We sat there quietly. The sun was dropping behind the red barn. Cattle moved slowly across the pasture. The wooden fence cast long shadows over the grass. For the first time in months, the ranch felt peaceful again. A week later, I received a letter from the county. The letter officially confirmed that my property boundaries had been restored to their original legal description. I framed it, not because I needed proof anymore, but because I wanted to remember what had happened. The 18 guards had come to my ranch believing numbers gave them power. They were wrong. Power wasn't 18 men standing in a driveway. It wasn't money. It wasn't an HOA badge. It wasn't a development company with millions of dollars behind it. Power was knowing the truth, documenting it, staying calm, and refusing to surrender something simply because someone powerful told you that you had to. One evening, I stood on the porch with the same coffee mug I'd been holding on the morning the 18 guards arrived. The sun was setting. The ranch was quiet. I looked toward the gate. There were no black SUVs, no guards, no construction equipment, just an old wooden sign hanging from the fence. Mercer ranch. I thought about everything that had happened. The forged signature, the threats, the courtroom, the neighbors, the 18 men who had come to drag me away. And I realized something. They had never really understood what they were dealing with. They saw an old rancher standing alone on a porch. They didn't see the years behind his eyes. They didn't see the discipline. They didn't see the training. They didn't see the scars. And they certainly didn't understand that the man they were trying to intimidate had once commanded people in places where one bad decision could mean life or death. I didn't need to tell them who I was. I didn't need to prove it. The truth had done that for me. I took one final sip of coffee and looked across the pasture. Then I smiled, because sometimes the strongest person in the fight isn't the one who throws the first punch. It's the one who knows exactly when not to. And that was the lesson the HOA learned the hard way. They sent 18 men to drag me off my land, but they never realized they were standing in front of the one man they should have never tried to intimidate.